Among the most celebrated RPGs to hit PC over the last few years, Divinity Original Sin 2 makes a surprise debut on Switch. Not only that, but it ties into the PC experience superbly by offering the same options to let you progress through its story, and then sync your save to the Steam version once you're done. All of which means you can play wherever you are, and then carry on with the premium grade visuals on your PC at home. We've seen the rise of crossplay in the likes of Fortnite, but this again shows Switch coming into its own as a perfect complement to the home experience, especially with PC. Of course, Divinity 2 is known for being a very quintessential PC game. From its lush visuals, a vibrant mix of forests and dungeons powered by developer Larian's in-house engine, down to its turn-based RPG mechanics, it's rich with fine detail. It's so dense with options, in fact, I had doubts that a satisfying portable version would work at all. After all, here we have the PC version running maxed out at 60fps on a GTX 1080 Ti. The hotkeys fill the bottom of the screen on a progress save, and technically, it looks a league ahead of what Nintendo's handheld should be able to pull off. And yet, a port exists, and the developer has risen to a very big challenge here. Playing it on Switch this week then, yes, there are cutbacks. They're big, it's unavoidable. A 39GB game install on PC is pruned back here to 11GB after all. As ever though, it's a matter of which cutbacks you can accept to get the benefits, and the developer appears to have made smart choices. This is fundamentally a feature-complete version of Divinity 2, right down to a 4-person multiplayer and the freedom to eke out your own path using your chosen character abilities and traits. Visually speaking, the art direction comes through effectively despite a huge hit to its native resolutions, either portable or docked. Equally, the lowered frame rate, and yes, it does kind of stick out, is a distraction. You'll have noticed drops under 30fps, but given it is a turn-based game, the impact isn't quite as dramatic as it might be in an FPS for example. So let's see what we've got. Resolutions first. Divinity 2 runs with a dynamic resolution setup on Switch, and so that means while docked, you're hitting 1280x720 at best. Though with that said, the all-crucial UI over the top is rendered at 900p, and it's redesigned just for this version. Now, if we're to push the engine hard, that dynamic res slips while docked under a TV down to 1088x612 according to my calculations. This combination of spells in one spot really hammers the Switch GPU. And yes, image quality takes a visible hit once it goes to that number. Even so, all of this is backed up by a pass of FXAA, which does a reasonable job of keeping most jagged edges at bay. So you won't see much sawtooth artifacting, but it simply will look, well, blurrier. Now, in terms of the pure mechanical side of the game, the Switch version is still intact despite this, largely thanks to the UI being so clear. The team has gone to great lengths to make that user interface look the part on console. Even on Switch's smaller screen, it looks clean and easy to follow, scaled properly for readability. Speaking on the portable mode meanwhile, the native resolution there is altered in step 2, especially given its lower GPU clocks. The visuals are rendered at 1152x648 in the best case there, as the top number. The lowest I've caught meanwhile in my testing is 880x495, in that exact same battle with all those effects. So expectedly the results are hardly pin sharp, and it's likely the first thing to notice when moving from any other version. Working on Switch won't have been without its challenges. On top of cutting the install to 11GB, the team had to adapt to just 3 CPU cores on Switch and just 3.5GB of usable RAM. Emailing the team directly for answers, remarkably I'm told, the port took just under a year in total to achieve, and adapting the engine itself wasn't too arduous. Overall, it seems it was the CPU limits on Switch, with just 3 cores, that needed the most catering to. The game is full of subsystems, calculations under the hood, plus a physics engine that needs to be optimized to work around a stricter CPU budget. The fact that 4-person multiplayer support is working at all, I'm told, surprised even the developer, who originally targeted just 2 players online. This part seemingly took extensive work to get right. It's a steep mountain to climb. Visually speaking then, any comparison with PC will be brutal, but it's fascinating to see how close it gets. On top of the cutback resolutions, much of the settings on Switch are pruned back in some way. polygon counts on certain models are reduced, and texture resolution is also cut down to help fit in a smaller RAM allocation. A customized cascade shadow system is included too, meaning the fade in for shade is different on Switch overall, while ambient occlusion is stripped back too. With that all being said, some big features make the cut here. Lighting detail is kept at PC's medium setting, for example, though light shafts are removed. Plus we get FXAA as mentioned, plus bloom is enabled too. On balance, it's clear a lot of core settings are pushed back. Even so, there's so much detail maintained here. Those lush forest areas still look dense with vegetation. The geometric framework of those cliff sides is intact too. In terms of the framework, it's the same game as on PC, but the sugarcoating over the top is simply removed. It's fair to say the game is still recognisable as the same then. Again, I'm getting flashbacks to The Witcher 3 as a recent example of an impossible port made possible by smart changes, tweaking the visuals in a way that still leaves a decent looking game. The comparisons don't flatter next to a maxed out GTX 1080 Ti hitting 60 FPS of course, but what we're left with is still up there as one of the better looking Switch games in its own way. One unavoidable step back from PC is in the controls. Rather than pointing and clicking your way through with a mouse, movement is handled in a more direct fashion with the analog sticks. And in battle, well, pressing the Y button takes your cursor to the hotkey bar at the bottom for you to select your move. If you've already played it on PS4 or Xbox One already, it's the same deal really on Switch. It's the best they could really do without the option of a mouse and keyboard, fine for traversal, but in battle a little bit more cumbersome. It's a shame actually that the touchscreen isn't used at all here to give you more direct access to those hotkeys. Another aspect that takes a step back is the loading times on Switch. Now, despite loading lower grade textures, Switch still takes longer to load new areas. It's a regular occurrence too. Later in the game you'll be warping between areas, plus you could be restarting from save states quite often given the difficulty. It's in line with expectations, but going from an SSD equipped PC where loading saves is near instantaneous, yeah, it'll stick out a little. Still, that's the price you have to pay to have this game on the move. The overall turnout in terms of presentation and the mechanics is largely as good as you can hope for. The cloud save system is of course the real achievement here. Now it will involve signing into your Steam account via the Switch, and I had troubles on my first attempt. Once I got it running with an account filled with saves though, it's very functional. Saves automatically sync on a button press, and while it may take a few minutes to populate the list, it genuinely works. There is one caveat though. If you've dabbled with mods on PC, the Switch version will request the relevant mod packages and files. Obviously there's no way to download those to Switch, and so it just fails to load that save. So be warned, combining mods with this version doesn't work. It's looking for the vanilla save file. How about performance on Switch then? When taking those maxed out saves from PC, the worry is that Tegra X1 chipset could struggle, especially if the portable mode is the focus. Generally, I found starting a new game and wandering around Fort Joy didn't give me much of a problem. It runs at a 30 FPS cap and pretty consistently too. There are hiccups mid-dungeon just as the game autosaves, which can be a distraction, but in general it's much better than I expected on the portable front. And if you play the PC version, you will be familiar with that autosave hitch, if to a less obvious extent. The later game areas show a different story. Keeping with portable mode, it's clear the game can dip to the mid 20 FPS range, and potentially far more. Indeed, taking a more progressed save in docked play, we can even hit around 10 FPS in the extremes. So here's a battle in a forest encampment. Multiple enemies and a full squad of players fully armed with skills. And even with the high GPU clocks while playing docked, piling loads of area of effect spells on one area is what really gets it to the lower numbers. Triggering a skill is an issue, and this is where you generally get those lower bound resolution readings. Again, the lowest frame rate I've seen is 10 FPS, but that's really one critical point where movement is out of your hands anyway. Whether you can accept those drops, which are pretty sizable, is down to how engrossed you are in the game itself. If you see the Switch version as a handheld extension of PC, a temporary break from the full experience back home, then it's easier to forgive it. Arguably though, if this is your first and only impression of Divinity 2, and you're playing the whole game this way, it's a slightly harder sell. It's impressive, yes, mechanically complete as it is. but it's clearly not the ideal way to interact with the incredible world the team has created. On balance, Divinity 2 on Switch is another impossible port that's come to be, purely thanks to a lot of careful design choices. Flawed as it is, I'm glad this exists. There's not a huge amount of value to playing docked in my view, but it's simply uncontested as a handheld take on the game. Add in the online save sharing and it's a very big deal for fans of the desktop experience. As for the developer's credentials, the team's ongoing support for Divinity 2 only bolsters its reputation. The next project for them is Baldur's Gate 3, understood to be based on the same technology as Divinity. So fingers crossed, hopefully this is being treated as a dipping of the toe as they continue to work on Switch games. But that's all I have time for today. If you did find this video useful in any way, please let me know by liking or subscribing. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any video lands. To get the source file to this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.